All right, let's dive in. This time we're tackling something pretty epic. The hero archetype.
Sounds exciting.
It is. But we're going deeper than just capes and swords, though. Our sources take this whole thing from a psychological angle. Looking at the hero's traits, their motivations, fears, even their shadow side.
Oh, wow. The shadow side of a hero. That's an interesting twist.
Right. And get this, we're going to connect all of that to personal growth and even touch on the idea of the shadow self.
I'm intrigued already.
Me too. So, to start off, our sources define the hero in a way that's kind of familiar, like courage, strength, this quest for honor, the classic stuff.
Makes sense.
But they also emphasize this drive to constantly be better, to make a positive impact on the world. It's not just about reacting to things, it's about actively shaping things.
That's a good point. So like they're saying the hero isn't just along for the ride, they're driving the action.
Exactly. Like, think about King Arthur searching for the Holy Grail. It's more than just finding a cool object, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's about Arthur proving himself, becoming the best leader he can be. That inner transformation is huge.
Okay, so it's about inner battles too, not just slaying dragons. I like that. But let's get specific. Our sources break down some core traits of a hero.
Okay, like what?
Well, obviously there's courage and determination. It's like Frodo in Lord of the Rings facing impossible odds for something bigger than himself.
Totally. But it's not just about charging blindly into danger either.
Yeah, right.
Our sources point out that real hero courage comes with resilience. Think about Katniss from the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah, she's always getting knocked down, but always gets back up.
Exactly. She adapts, keeps fighting. That's a crucial part of being a hero.
It's about grit, not just glory. Now, this next trait really made me think. It's not enough to be strong. A hero needs a strong moral compass.
Oh, interesting.
It's like they're saying they're not just powerful, they're guided by this sense of right and wrong.
Makes sense. And doesn't that often lead to self-sacrifice?
Totally. Which is another defining hero trait, according to our sources, putting others first, even if it means personal risk.
It's more than just duty, though. It's like this deep human need to belong, to contribute to the group.
That's a really good point. So it's not just about altruism, it's about our place in the world. Okay, before we get too carried away with how awesome heroes are, our sources do point out that they have fears too.
Of course, even the most courageous people have weaknesses.
Exactly. And for a hero, one of the biggest fears is bat failure, like not living up to their own ideals or the expectations put on them.
I can imagine that would be tough. Imagine carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, like Frodo with that ring. The fear of not being enough must be intense.
Right. But wait, doesn't that kind of contradict the whole self-sacrifice thing? If they're so afraid of failing, why risk everything for others?
That's where it gets interesting. Our sources actually suggest this fear of failure is part of what drives them. It's not just about helping others, it's also about proving themselves, silencing those inner doubts.
Oh, wow. So it's a mix of altruism and ego. That's complex.
Very much so. It shows that even the perfect hero archetype has this internal struggle.
Right. Now, I bet our listener is thinking, okay, this is all fine for myths and movies, but what about me? And that's where things get really fascinating.
Because we all have that potential, right?
That's exactly what our sources argue. They say the hero archetype isn't limited to fictional characters. It's a reflection of something in all of us, that potential for courage, resilience, wanting to make a difference. It's there in everyone.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about this hero within idea.
Well, it links back to that whole hero's journey concept by Joseph Campbell.
Ah, right. The stages of a hero's adventure.
Yep. And the cool thing is, this framework can be applied to our own lives.
So you mean our everyday struggles, our personal growth, it's all kind of like a hero's journey.
Exactly. Think about a time you faced a big challenge. You probably had doubts, setbacks, maybe even wanted to quit, but you pushed through, learned from it, and came out stronger on the other side.
I never thought of it like that.
Right. That's essentially a hero's journey. But hold on, if we're all potential heroes, what does that actually look like in real life? Are we talking about grand gestures and saving the world?
Not necessarily. Remember, different cultures see the hero differently.
True.
In some Eastern cultures, it's less about individual achievement and more about serving the community, keeping things harmonious.
So it's not always about fighting evil. Sometimes it's about building something good.
That's a good point. So it's more nuanced than just the classic good versus evil story.
Definitely. But before we get too deep into our own potential hero journeys, our sources do point out the downsides of this archetype.
Oh, right. It can't all be sunshine and roses, can it?
Nope. Even positive archetypes have a shadow side.
And for the hero, what does that look like?
Well, it can be a fear of being vulnerable, an obsession with winning, or even being reckless. Think of a hero who's so focused on their mission that they forget about the people around them.
Oh, so they become isolated, driven to extremes. Exactly. It's a reminder that even with good intentions, we need balance. We can aim for greatness without losing our humanity, recognizing our flaws, seeking help when we need it, admitting we're not always strong.
That's where true strength comes from sometimes. This makes me think about some of the heroes we see in history or fiction who don't always make the best choices, like that the ends justify the means kind of thinking.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
Definitely. And that's why understanding the shadow side is so important. It helps us be more aware to question our own motives and realize when we might be going off track.
Absolutely. It's about being a hero consciously, not just blindly chasing ambition.
This is giving me a lot to think about. I think we need a break to digest all this before we move on.
Good idea. A little reflection time is always good, right?
Right.
To let those ideas sink in.
Totally. And I think that's a big part of this whole hero within thing. It's not just listening. It's about really thinking about it, connecting it to our own lives. So let's do that. Our sources talk about the strengths and challenges of this hero archetype, how they actually play out in real life.
Okay, sounds good.
Where should we start?
Well, the positives are pretty inspiring, right? The hero's bravery, self-discipline, leadership. Those qualities can be contagious, almost.
Yeah, it's like they show us what we're capable of, push us to be better. But hold on, isn't there a danger in always pushing ourselves, trying to be this heroic ideal?
That's where the challenges come in. Our sources talk about how fear of vulnerability, getting too competitive, needing everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
Those can really trip a hero up, both in stories and in real life. It's like they're so busy being strong, achieving their goals, that they forget to take care of themselves, connect with others.
It's about balance, right? Pushing yourself, but knowing when to take a break.
Exactly. It reminds me of that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. Even heroes need to recharge.
They do. Which brings us back to that whole shadow self thing. We were talking about how even good archetypes have a darker side.
Right, right.
For the hero, what does that actually look like?
Well, it can show up as recklessness, maybe getting obsessed with power, not caring about the consequences, as long as they reach their noble goal.
So even with good intentions, you can take it too far.
Absolutely. And that's why understanding this shadow side is so important. It helps us be more discerning, to question our own motives, realize when we might be veering off track.
Okay, so how do we actually recognize that shadow side in ourselves? I mean, it's easy to spot flaws in fictional characters, but what about when we're looking in the mirror?
That's a good question. Our sources say it starts with paying attention to our motivations. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Is it truly to make a positive impact, or is it about wanting to feel important, in control?
It's like checking our egos, making sure our actions match our values, not just our desires. But honestly, those lines can get blurry. How do we know when we've crossed over to that shadow side?
One way is to notice how our actions affect others. Are we thinking about their needs? Are we willing to listen to feedback, even if it's not what we want to hear? Or are we so fixated on our goals that we bulldoze over anyone in our way?
That makes sense. It's about realizing that even with good intentions, we can still mess up, hurt others.
Exactly. And when we do, it's important to own up to it, apologize, and make things right. The hero's journey isn't about being perfect. It's about learning and growing.
Okay, I see how all these pieces fit together now. The traits, motivations, the shadow side. It makes the whole idea of being a hero a lot more realistic. But I think our listener is ready for the good stuff. How do we actually tap into this hero within and start living more heroically?
It starts with recognizing those heroic qualities that are already there. Think about times you've been courageous, resilient, compassionate. Maybe you stood up for someone being bullied, volunteered for a cause you believe in, or just listened to a friend who needed to talk.
Those everyday moments of courage and kindness, we often don't give ourselves enough credit for those.
Right. And the more we appreciate those moments, the more we'll start to see ourselves as capable of making a difference.
But let's be real, not every challenge is going to be easy. We'll get overwhelmed, discouraged, maybe even want to give up. What do we do when those setbacks hit?
Well, remember, resilience is a big part of being a hero. Think about Katniss Everdeen again. She always faced impossible odds. But she didn't let setbacks break her. They just fueled her to keep fighting.
So it's about bouncing back, that mental and emotional strength to keep going. But how do we actually develop that resilience? It's easy to say don't give up, but doing it is hard.
It takes practice. Our sources suggest a few things that can help. First, changing how we view challenges. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, what if we see them as chances to grow, to learn?
So, like focusing on what we can gain, not just how hard it is.
Exactly. And second, having a good support system is huge. Remember, even heroes need help. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, encourage you, and will be there to pick you up when you fall.
It really does take a village. We don't have to do this alone. But, earlier we mentioned how different cultures view the hero differently. How does that affect our own personal journeys?
It reminds us that there's no one right way to be a hero. What's heroic in one place might be totally different somewhere else. Like in individualistic cultures, it's often about taking risks, achieving personal glory.
The lone cowboy riding off into the sunset.
Exactly. But in more collectivist cultures, heroism might be about putting the group first, maintaining harmony, working together.
It's less about standing out and more about blending in, contributing to the group. It makes you realize there are so many ways to be heroic.
And it encourages us to be aware of our own cultural biases, how they shape our view of heroism. The important thing is finding a path that fits our own values and beliefs.
That's a really empowering thought. Like, we get to define what heroism means for us. But before we get too excited about our own epic adventures, I think we need to circle back to the shadow side.
Good point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement and forget about the potential dangers.
Exactly. So how do we avoid those pitfalls, make sure our good intentions don't lead us down the wrong path?
Well, the first thing is being brutally honest with ourselves about why we're doing this. Why are we trying to be heroic? Is it really about making a difference, or are we craving validation, power, or control?
It's a tough question to face. Like looking in the mirror and seeing those less than perfect motives staring back at us.
It is. And it's not always easy to admit our motives aren't 100% pure, but it's essential if we want to avoid that shadow side.
So it's about self-awareness, questioning our intentions. But what if we realize we've been acting out of ego or trying to control things? How do we fix that?
We have to admit the problem, take responsibility, be willing to apologize to anyone we've hurt, and try to make things right.
That takes a lot of courage, especially when we've been so focused on seeing ourselves as the good guy, admitting we've made mistakes, that maybe we're not as righteous as we thought. That's tough.
It is. And that's why self-compassion is so important. We need to be kind to ourselves, even when we mess up. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning.
Yeah, it's about being human. We make mistakes, we learn from them. But what about those times when we feel lost, like our heroic spark is fading? How do we stay motivated, connected to our purpose?
One way is to remind ourselves of our values, why they matter, what do we believe in, what kind of impact do we want to have. Connecting to those core values gives us direction, especially when things are tough.
It's like a compass pointing us in the right direction.
Exactly. And another thing is to surround ourselves with inspiring people. Find mentors, role models, friends who embody the values you admire. They can help us stay on track.
Like having our own personal cheerleading squad. But let's face it, not everyone is going to be supportive. There will be doubters, critics, maybe even people trying to hold us back. What do we do about that?
That's where we need to be discerning. Can we tell the difference between constructive criticism and just plain negativity? If someone is offering helpful feedback, we should listen.
But if someone's just trying to bring us down, we need to set boundaries.
Exactly. We choose who we let into our lives. Surround yourself with people who lift you up.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I'm starting to get this hero archetype on a much deeper level. It's not just about superpowers, it's about our own inner strength, resilience, compassion.
And it's about realizing that the hero's journey isn't a straight line. There will be ups and downs, good times and bad. But the important thing is to keep going, learn from everything, and never give up on ourselves or our dreams.
It's getting really personal now. It's like taking all these big ideas and applying them to our own lives, finding those heroic moments in everyday things.
Exactly. That's what we hoped you'd get from this deep dive. The hero archetype isn't just a story. It's a reflection of what it means to be human, our capacity for courage, resilience, and change.
And it reminds us that we all have the potential to be heroes. But before we wrap up, there's one thing that's been on my mind.
Okay, what is it?
We've talked a lot about the individual journey, but what about the bigger picture? How does this hero archetype play out on a larger scale, like with social change and movements?
That's an interesting question. And our sources do touch on it. They say the hero archetype can be a powerful force for good in the world. Think about figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Malala Yousafzai.
All those people embody the heroic qualities we've been talking about. Courage, resilience, a fight for justice.
Exactly. And they inspired so many others to join them to work for a better world.
So it's like their personal hero journeys created a ripple effect, changed society.
It reminds us that we don't have to be famous or powerful to make a difference. Every act of kindness, every voice that speaks out against injustice, every effort to make the world better, those all contribute to a collective hero's journey.
It's like we're all weaving a big tapestry together. Each thread, no matter how small, makes the whole thing stronger.
And it's up to each of us to decide what kind of thread will be. Courage, compassion, resilience, or fear, apathy, indifference.
That's a lot to think about. I need a moment to let that sink in. It really makes you think about the power of small actions, doesn't it?
It does. It's not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about those quiet, everyday choices to be kind, stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Like those ripples we talked about, spreading outward. Even small acts can make a difference and inspire others.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the heart of this whole thing, the hero within. It's not about waiting for something big to happen. It's about those qualities inside us, courage, resilience, compassion, and letting those guide us every day.
You know, when we started, I think I had this pretty simplistic idea of what a hero was, like you need superpowers or something. But we've really gone deep, haven't we?
We have. And that's what's so great about these deep dives. Taking an idea, really pulling it apart, seeing the good, the bad, the complexities.
It helps us understand ourselves better, too. So if our listener were to take just one thing away from all this, what would it be?
I think it would be this. Being a hero isn't a finish line. It's a journey. It's about always growing, discovering who you are, and trying to live by what you believe in. And it's a journey we're all on, together.
I like that. And it means you don't need all the answers, you don't have to be perfect. It's about showing up, doing your best, and supporting each other.
Well said. And remember, even the greatest heroes make mistakes. It's about getting back up, learning, and staying true to what you believe in. That's what really matters.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder.
Right, I'm listening.
We've looked at the hero from every angle, but there's one question we haven't answered directly, and it's a question only you can answer. What would your hero's journey look like? What challenge would you face? What cause would you fight for? What change would you make in the world?
Wow, that's a powerful question. A real call to action for everyone listening.
It is. So, dear listener, what will your hero's journey be? Go out there and be the hero of your own story.
We'll be cheering you on.